And Senator Warnock of Georgia joins us now. It's great to have you on the show this morning. I'll start with the personal. I just want to know what it was like to make that speech in the position that you are in, historic position.
Well, good morning, Mika. It is great to be with you. I must tell you that to have the people of Georgia stand up in the way that they did in December and in November and in January, 5 million voters and then 4.4 Georgia voters turned out in a runoff. To send me and my friend and brother John Ossoff to the United States Senate is the honor of my life. You know, when I was born in Georgia, Georgia was represented by Richard B. Russell and Herman E. Talmadge, arch segregationists who were unabashed adversaries of civil rights and voting rights. But because Americans of all races stood up, all of these years later, I sit in the seat where Herman E. Talmadge sat. This is America. We've had to stand up for our democracy before, and we must stand up for it right now. Voting rights is preservative of all rights, and that's what my speech was about.
So how important is it for you that your fellow Democrats get on board and work together, doing whatever has to be done to make sure that H.R. 1 and also John Lewis's voting rights bill pass the United States Senate, pass the House, and get signed by this Democratic president?
It is almost impossible to overstate how important this really is. We are at an inflection point. This is a moral moment in America, a defining moment in our history. Voting rights is not just one issue alongside other issues. It is about who we say we are. It is about our covenant with one another as an American people. And so we've got to get on board. I know there's a big debate about the filibuster. I'm sure we're going to have that debate. But my argument is that voting rights is bigger than the filibuster, and we must pass voting rights whether we get rid of the filibuster or not.
Mr. Senator, it's Willie Geist. Great to have you on the show this morning. I do want to ask you about how you get this through. You mentioned the potential for eliminating the filibuster. Your colleague on the House side, James Clyburn, has said, on questions of civil rights, we need to get this through however we do it, even if that means putting aside some of the historic rules of the Senate and pushing the filibuster away. Do you agree that an elimination of the filibuster is needed to get this through?
I think that when it comes to voting rights, all options have to be on the table. We've seen carve-outs before with respect to the courts. So what could be more important than making sure that the voices of the American people are not squeezed out of their own democracy? And so, we should have 100 votes in the Senate for voting rights. It used to be a bipartisan issue. The last time we reauthorized the 1965 Voting Rights Act, George W. Bush was president, and it passed this same Senate 98-0. What changed? And so what I hope to do is to appeal to the conscience of all of my colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans. I believe in democracy. Reinhold Niebuhr was right. Humankind's inclination for justice makes democracy possible. Our inclination for injustice makes democracy necessary. We have to preserve the republic. There are politicians who are trying to win at any cost, even the cost of the democracy itself. We have to stand up in this defining moment and say that this is who we are as an American people. We believe in the democratic process. And I say that knowing that there will be moments when this side or that side will win or lose. But we have to cast our lots with the people. The republic belongs to the people and not to the politicians.
Senator Claire McCaskill has a question for you. Claire?
Good morning, Senator. I can't tell you how terrific it is to see you and to see you on the floor of the Senate giving a powerful speech about voting rights. You know, you're not from a bright blue state. And I want to just pose to you the question, how do we knit together the people who come from states like yours? And those are some Republicans, too. I mean, we've got Pat Toomey in a state that Joe Biden won. We have We have Ron Johnson in a state that Joe Biden won. How do we bring together those of you that are not from bright blue or bright red places to actually move the needle in a way that creates lasting change instead of having a situation where it goes back and forth based on who's got 50? Have you had an opportunity to sit down and talk with other senators that are from states like yours about a way forward that doesn't leave people of moderate states behind?
Well, here's the thing, Claire. We have got to give ourselves over to something larger than ourselves. I think that what we are dealing with right now is the ambition of politicians. I mean, look at the American people. When it comes to this COVID-19 relief package that we just passed, there is bipartisan support for the package, but that's not reflected in the vote that we saw just 2 weeks ago. It's not reflected here in this Capitol. There's a disconnect between where the American people are and what's happening in Washington right now. And if we let them crush our voting rights, if we let them move forward with this kind of partisan and racial gerrymandering that we will see increasingly if we don't pass federal legislation, we're going to find an increasing disconnect between where the people are and what happens in this House. And so I think in a real sense, we've got to stand up, we've got to save our democracy. And as the other side keeps pushing these terrible voter suppression tactics, then with an eye toward continuing to draw these lines and gerrymandering of districts in such a way, we're going to see them draw themselves into a kind of increasing irrationality, extremism, and irrelevance. We've got to save the democracy, and we've got to save our Republican sisters and brothers from themselves.
Mike Barnacle is with us, Senator, and he has a question for you. Mike.
Senator, speaking of your Republican colleagues, we realize that you've been in the Senate a little less than 3 months. But if you've had the opportunity to talk to any of your Republican colleagues and perhaps make some beginnings of a friendship with some of your Republican colleagues, do you have any sense of why they fear the changing demographics of this country, the changing face of this country, seemingly much more so than they fear Iran or China or Russia? They fear their own people.
Well, you know, I'm a pastor. It's in my instinct to reach out to folks. And yes, I've had some good conversations, and I feel like we're building some good friendships and relationships with some, and hopefully out of that will come the possibility of some unlikely alliances. And so I will continue to reach out. I mean, you're exactly right. What is this fear of the people? I mean, look what we're doing in Georgia. We are seeing these long lines in Georgia as people turned out in record numbers to vote. They're trying to pass legislation that will make the lines even longer as they make it difficult for people to vote early, to vote by mail. And then they're trying to make it a crime to bring people water who are standing in lines that they're making longer. We know what's going on here. They are trying to take control of the democracy so that there's this disconnect, and it doesn't matter whether they have the majority or not. It's anti-American, it's anti-democratic, and there ought to be bipartisan commitment to what is fundamental to who we say we are as an American people. One person, one vote.
Senator Warnock, before you go, I'd have to ask you about the horrific situation in your state, the murder sprees at the 3 separate spas, the murders of Asian women. What do you make so far of what the captured suspect has told investigators about what was his motive, and overall, what's the latest in that situation?
Well, it's heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to all of these families, and we ought to be praying for them with our lips, but also with our actions. We need a kind of active peace that stops these kinds of things as much as we can from happening in the first place. We'll hear, I guess, you know, his explanation in the days ahead, but we know hate when we see it. You know, we'll get into the nuances of it, but only hate drives you to take 8 precious lives in the way that he did. And I'm more interested in hearing the stories of the victims. That's really what we ought to be amplifying, their humanity, so that we can think about what we must do as a society to create what Dr. King called the beloved community.
Senator Raphael Warnock, thank you very much.